The fortifications of Paris in the 19th and 20th centuries comprise the Thiers Wall, surrounding the city of Paris, and farther from the city, the detached forts and their complementary fieldworks. They were built in two stages, 1840 to 1845, the Thiers Wall and the first ring of forts, about 5 kilometers from the city, 1874 to 1885, the second ring of forts, about 20 kilometers from the city. From a military point of view, Paris is a fortified camp situated in a basin. During the 19th century, both Prussian invasions saw the bombardment of Paris from the surrounding heights. Fortifications were extended outwards after each invasion as the range of artillery continued to develop, in order to deny the use of the heights to the enemy. Chronology. Louis XIV, 1670. The king demolishes the walls of Charles V and Louis XIII. Paris becomes an open city and remains so for 2 centuries. 1689. Vauban recommends the enclosure of Paris, with the construction of a second enclosure to include the then villages of Chalotte, Montmartre and Belleville, and 2 citadels flanking the city to the east and west to delay an enemy's approach. Louis XVI, 1784. The king orders the construction of the Farmers' General Wall, built not as a fortification, but as a means of taxation. Empire, 1814 to 1815. Paris is occupied twice at the end of the reign of Napoleon I. First fortification program, 1818. Minister of War Laurent de Wouvian Saint-Cyr creates a commission to present its views on the best defense system for Paris. 1820. The commission concludes that Paris must be placed in a state of defense, but proposes no specific project. 1830. Creation of a committee to study fortification, which returns to the debate and again concludes that fortification is necessary, without consensus on how this is to be done. 1833. The defense plan for Paris envisages the improvement of the Farmers' General Wall to a height of 6 meters, 2 ranges of crenellations and 65 towers or bastions, in advance of the Farmers' General Wall, several delaying fortifications, along with a fortified line along the canal between Romainville and Saint-Denis, and a system of floodable areas around Saint-Denis. Groundworks with casemates and star-shaped forts and redoubts on the heights between Saint-Denis and Nogent-sur-Marne. Transformation of the Château de Vincennes into a modern fort. The works, carried out by General Éléonore de Friche de Valadze, were often stopped and were not completed. In fact, 2 options worked in opposition. Option 1. A broad continuous enclosure that includes the suburbs in the defensive system, but not employing the Farmers' General Wall. De Valadze supports this scheme, a continuation of the plans of Vauban and François-Nicolas Benoit, Baron Haxo. Option 2. The arrangement of the capital as a vast fortified camp, based on permanent forts occupying the principal positions while keeping a containment shell behind. Criticisms of this option relate to the insufficiency of the guarantee of defense. An enemy could easily penetrate between the obstacles, then engage the Farmers' General fortifications. 1836. Creation of a commission on the defense of the kingdom. 1838. On July 16, a plan of defense is adopted, combining the 2 options in a show of unanimity. 1840. The Treaty of London excludes France. Adolphe Thiers, considering that the new treaty includes the germ of a new invasion threat, seizes the occasion to commence the construction of the new fortifications. On September 1, General Guillaume de la Brunerie is named director of the fortification program. The appointment and work is publicly announced on September 13, 1841 over the reservations of the General Council of the Seine. 140 million francs are appropriated for the work allocated, including 17,000 3,970 million francs for land acquisition, 16,608 million francs for earthwork, and 83,356 million francs for masonry. The law authorizing work was promulgated by Louis Philippe on April 3, authorizing a continuous wall for both sides of the Seine, known as the Thiers Wall, supported by 16 detached forts. 1845 work is completed. 1860. The limits of the city of Paris are extended from the Farmers' General Wall to the Thiers Wall, in accordance with the reorganization of the Paris urban fabric planned and executed by Georges-Eugène Haussmann. Franco-Prussian War. July 1870. France declares war on Prussia. July 13. September 1870. Napoleon III is captured at Sedan and capitulates. A republic is proclaimed and the Prussians move toward Paris. The capital is transformed into a fortified camp. A portion of the Thiers Wall gates are closed, along with canals and rail line entries. Houses are demolished in the designated zone, non edificandi, to clear lines of fire. The Prussians arrive on the 19th of September and establish a siege, which will last 4 months. January 1871. On the 28th, the Treaty of Versailles is signed, stipulating that all of the forts forming the perimeter defense of Paris, together with their armaments, be handed over to the German forces. The treaty further stipulates the disarmament of the Thiers Wall. March 1871. The German army abandons the forts on the left bank of the Seine. The 20th of September 1871. The German army abandons the forts on the right bank of the Seine. Second program of fortification during the 1870 war. The fortifications were relatively ineffective. 1874. On the 17th of July, a law inspired by the ideas of Ecuta Rivières creates new programs for defensive works in the north and east of France, including some intended for the defense of Paris. 1885. The program is completed. 196 forts, 58 smaller works and 278 batteries are in place on the borders and its strategic points within France at an estimated cost of 450 million francs for the works and 229 million francs for their armament. The removal of the Thiers Wall. 1883. On June 11, the Municipal Council of Paris votes to request the removal of the Thiers Wall. The properties transferred to the city and the end of restrictions on building in its vicinity. 1918. During the war, the Thiers Wall proves to be ineffective in the defense of Paris, as the range of German artillery such as the Paris gun renders walls irrelevant. 1919. On the 19th of April, the city purchases the property for 100 million francs from the state of France. The city must purchase or expropriate the associated grounds and must maintain the zone non edificandi. Work begins on the demolition of the walls. 1925 to 1930. The territoire zone is annexed to the city. 1930. A law is enacted to regulate the methods for compensation of the zones. The forts. Military doctrine for the employment of the forts. The doctrines for the use of the forts depend on the context of the time. During the 19th century, the roads of armies were obligated to move along existing lines of communication in order to maintain the provisioning without resorting to dirt roads in unfavorable seasons. Therefore, a fortification located on an important road would be able to slow or stop a large troop formation. For example, the Fort de Charenton was placed to dominate Route Nationale A6, the Paris-Geneva road, and Route Nationale A19, the road to Belfort, as well as the Pont de Charenton on the Marne and the Pont l'Anglais on the Seine. In wartime, the fort would fulfill several functions. In the manner of a fortified town, the fort would provide a place of shelter for troops while passively resisting an assault by the enemy. If the enemy ignores the fort and circumvents it, they will be subject to attack from the rear by the fort's garrison, obliging a portion of the attacking forces to remain behind as protection. It is a point of concentration and protection for artillery. It is a point of support for friendly forces. First ring of forts. The first ring of 16 detached forts and complementary works, constituting the first line of defense a few kilometers from Paris, and supporting the Thiers Wall encircling Paris. The 16 forts built around Paris between 1840 and 1845 are shown in the following table. The order described in the first column describes the forts in order as they appear as one proceeds clockwise around Paris. Forts are named for the communities they defended, not necessarily those in which they are located. Complementary works. Second ring of forts. This section includes those works completed between 1870 and 1890 as part of the Écoute Rivieres fortifications, in the region of 20 kilometers from the capital. Bibliography. Félix et Louis Lazare, Dictionnaire historique des Heures et Monuments de Paris en 1855, Écoute Par Maisonneuve et Larose, 1993, p. 132. Renaud Gagné Denis Prouvost, Sur les traces des enceinte de Paris, Paragramme, 2004. Jacques Hilaire, Dictionnaire historique des Heures de Paris, Guy Le Hallet, Histoire des fortifications de Paris et leur extension en Île-de-France, Editions Horvath, 1995. Guy Le Hallet, Sur les traces de l'enceinte et du prieuré Saint-Martin des Champs, La Ballade des Fortifs, in Paris aux Saint Villages. Numbers chapter 34-45.